Hey guys, Dan here with DeviceEnforcer, and today we'll be taking a look at 3 different 2.1 audio systems for your PC at different price levels so you can decide which one is right for you. I've used each of the systems that we'll be taking a look at today as my main audio system with this computer at some point, so I should be able to shed some light on which ones are a good value. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you're already somewhat familiar with what a 2.1 audio system is, but if you're not, a 2.1 audio system has 2 stereo channels that handle the mid-range and high-end frequencies, and then 1 low-range subwoofer to handle, obviously, the low-range frequencies. This type of system is ideal for connecting to a PC because it provides a pretty good coverage of all the frequency ranges. With that, let's take a look at the first system for today, which is the Logitech Z3 This is our lowest cost system for today, which normally goes for around $25 to $35. In the box, you get the satellite speakers and the subwoofer with its attached control pod and the input cable. On the subwoofer, you'll notice that the actual 4-inch driver is down firing and the cabinet is simply ported on the front. The setup for this system is actually quite simple. First, you'll want to plug the subwoofer into power. Then, on the back of the subwoofer, you'll want to plug in this cable from the satellite speakers into this port right here. On the back of the satellite speakers, I'm not sure if you can see this, but they're labeled right above the cable with R and L. So make sure that when you set them up, you put them on the correct side. R goes on the right, obviously, and L goes on the left. And then find a spot for this control pod. And then this cable here is your input cable. This goes to the back of your motherboard. This green port right here is your output. Once everything's connected, you can turn the system on with this button on the control pod, and this green LED will light up indicating that the system is receiving power. There's a volume control knob on the side that you can rotate downwards for lowering the volume and upwards for raising the volume. I typically leave this just all the way up. There's no real reason not to, and then you can control the level of the volume within Windows. You'll also notice on the front here, there's a 3.5mm jack that you can plug your headphones into. That's actually pretty useful because typically this control pod would be positioned closer to you on your desk than, say, your case's front panel audio. So if you have a shorter cable on your headphone, this might be an easier way to connect to the computer with that. I haven't noticed any reduction in audio quality using this cable rather than plugging into like the front panel audio or directly into the rear jack on the motherboard. So overall, my least favorite part about the design of this unit is definitely this control pod. It's very light, and then when you are positioning this on your desk, getting it set up, you'll probably want to manage the cables. So if you have this towards the back edge and then you start pulling at the cables from under the desk, it tends to fall off. So my advice would be, if you want to install this for yourself or like a relatively permanent period of time, you might want to get some 3M tape or something, or a command strip to attach it more firmly to the desk. But other than that, I've got no complaints about the actual hardware of this unit. The next system we'll be taking a look at today is also from Logitech. This is the Z6 This is our mid-range system for today, and it typically goes for $120. But there's occasional sales that drop the price to $90. In the box, you get this right satellite speaker that has the controls on it, the left satellite speaker with no controls, the subwoofer, which is much larger than the one from the Z3 we just looked at, and this audio cable 3.5mm on each end to connect it to your board. So contrary to the subwoofer on the Z3 this has a 7-inch front-firing woofer, and it's ported on the side of the unit. In terms of setup, again, the first step is to plug the subwoofer into power. Then for the right satellite speaker, the connector that comes off of it sort of looks like a VGA connector, and that goes in here and then you screw it down. For the left satellite speaker, it's just a single terminal on the end, and that goes in this port on the bottom here. And then with this input cable, plug either end of it, it doesn't really matter, into the green port right above where you plugged the right speaker into. And then this end goes to your motherboard again, like so. Also on the back of the subwoofer there's an RCA input, but I would expect for the majority of users it's easier to just use this cable that came with the speaker. But if you have one of these laying around and you think it'll be higher quality, feel free to use that. Taking a closer look at the right satellite with the controls, you'll see there's a button here for power. When you press this, an LED comes on. It's a red LED this time, indicating the system is powered. In the center here, there's a volume knob, and on the right side of the unit, there's a bass adjustment knob, and that has a notch where the rotation will stop to indicate that that's like the default point of the bass adjustment. Also on the side of this unit, you get the same headphone out that the Z3 had, and also an aux in this time, so if you want to hook up your phone via an aux cable, you can do that while it's still connected to your PC out the back, and that's just an easier way than having to mess around with the ports on the back of the subwoofer if you want to play a different source through this. I don't have any major hardware design critiques with this system like I did with the Z3, so we're just going to move straight on to the next one. Our final 2.1 system is actually not a pre-made product, but rather a hi-fi system composed of individual components. You may have noticed these behind me earlier in the video, and this is our high-end system for today. With the components I have here, the total cost of a system like this would be around $550. The bookshelf speakers are the Fluance SX6s, which go for around $150 for the pair. The subwoofer here is the Fluance DB10, which costs $200, and then this receiver over here that's hooking everything together is the Pioneer SX10AE, which goes for around $150 as well. You'll also incur a little bit of additional cost because you need at least an RCA cable to connect to the computer, a subwoofer cable to run to the sub, and speaker wire and banana plugs to connect each of the satellite speakers to the receiver. One of the biggest advantages of a component-based audio system like this, as opposed to the two Logitech systems that I showed you before, is that with this you can mix and match whatever receiver, bookshelf speakers, and sub you would want to use, and you can interchange them if you decide you want to upgrade just part of it rather than the whole system. So since I'm not expecting anyone to run out and buy the exact components that I have here for the high-end system in this video, I'm not going to cover like the setup process like I did with the other ones, because that'll be unique to whatever products you get. The main focus of this video isn't necessarily this exact system, but rather, can a high-end system like this possibly hope to justify its value when compared to the two lower-cost Logitech alternatives? Or can the two Logitech speakers possibly hope to compete with the sound quality from this expensive system? Right off the bat, with a system like this, you get a bunch of additional value from your receiver, which typically they have a bunch of additional features that the 2.1 systems from Logitech can't hope to compete with. So this one in particular has a remote that I can control all the functions from a distance wherever I am in the room. It's also got a built-in radio tuner if that's something that matters to you. If you listen to FM or AM radio, you can do that without having a separate radio. Additionally, there's 4 inputs on this as opposed to the 1 or 2 that the Logitech systems had. Also, there's Bluetooth input, so if you want to use your phone instead of your computer to stream audio directly to the receiver, you can do that. And finally, you can also use this receiver on the fly, adjust the bass and treble with the remote. So if you decide, oh, I wish there was a little bit more bass at this part, you can just do that. Additionally, this receiver in particular has a 1/4 inch headphone jack, which is slightly larger than the traditional 3.5mm headphone jack. This will allow you to connect higher end headphones and drive headphones with a higher resistance. I think that's enough talking about the different systems. It's time to see how they actually sound compared to each other. For this segment, I'll be using a blue snowball microphone to record the audio, It's positioned at the level of the desktop surface, so it'll be in line with where your ears are supposed to be if you're actually using these correctly. It's about 8 feet from the desk. For the best results, if you want to get the most accurate idea of what these sound like, please wear your headphones or earbuds. Each of the systems will be adjusted before the test so that they're at the same volume level, what I would consider to be a reasonable listening level. We're not going to be cranking these things up. I don't want to get a noise complaint. After the audio test is done, I'll come back with some of my notes on what I think of the various audio performance of each of them. So enjoy this audio test. So hopefully that gave you some idea of the performance of each of the systems, but I'm going to summarize my thoughts as well because obviously it's not a perfect system for me to record the audio here and then play it back to you in a YouTube video. We'll start off with the Z313. Honestly, for the $25 price, this is a pretty good set of speakers. This would make a fine system for someone who typically used to use headphones and wants to invest in speakers to share videos with their friends or family, or someone who occasionally wants to listen to music at low or medium volume levels. Like I mentioned, I didn't turn the speakers up very high for this video, but I know from previous experience the Z313s get this sort of crackly noise if you turn them up too high, so they aren't the best for high volume situations. But for only $25, this is definitely a set of speakers that I could live with. Moving on to the Z623, I feel that this system has a much harder time justifying its price. It definitely has a much more powerful and slightly lower bass than the Z313, but the mids and highs don't sound very clear or crisp. They're more recessed and hidden by the bass. In quite a few situations, I actually prefer the sound of the $25 Z313s to the sound of this system, which is, as you recall, 4 times more expensive. The only situation in which I could really recommend these is if you're interested in listening exclusively to bass-heavy music. Finally, let's discuss the high-end system. I don't know if you could tell in the video, but obviously this system sounds much better than either of the other two, and for its price it is better. The bass is much lower and louder if that's what you're after, but obviously it can be tuned. It also has better clarity in the mids and highs that wasn't present on either of the other two systems due to the addition of the high-range tweeters on each of the units. When I first upgraded to the system, I was blown away by the fact that I could hear parts of songs that I'd previously never noticed on either of the Logitech systems. So yeah, they're pretty good. But with that out of the way, are they worth their price? I mean, my setup here, it costs almost 6 times as much as the Z6 23. That's 22 times the price of the Z3 13s. So how can it justify that price? It'll honestly depend really heavily on your use case. If you need the additional features that come from the receiver, honestly you don't really have another option here, because either of the Logitech systems, they don't have the same features. If you like the idea of being able to upgrade individual components of your audio system, like just the bookshelf speakers, or just the subwoofer, or just the receiver if you need more inputs, obviously the high-end system is the only one that can do that as well. Finally, if what you want is just the best 2.1 audio experience you can get, this is the type of setup you'll need. So to summarize, my ultimate pick for the best value is the Z3 13. It's insane what you get here for only $25, and it makes a great starter set of speakers. The best overall listening experience is, of course, the high-end component-based setup. The Z6 23 falls in a strange middle ground where it isn't cheap, and it also doesn't sound very good, so I would probably give this one a miss and look elsewhere. Hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel. And I will see you in the next video.